What's going on, guys? Welcome back to another episode of the After Credit Scene. We're talking episodes 8 and 9, the finale of Agatha All Along. Before we get started, please like and subscribe to the channel. Hit the notification bell so when we drop new content for new shows and movies, you'll be the first one to find out about it. Share this thing all across the multiverse, and thanks for watching, guys. We've had a whole bunch of you tune in for this series, and we're looking forward to doing many more. So, a lot of spoilers, real spoiler heavy, so if you haven't watched this stuff yet, go back and watch it, then come back here. Stay tuned for the end, because at the end I'm going to give some hot takes. There's a whole bunch about this show right at the end here that I did not like. But right off the bat, let me just say, in terms of the quality of the show, in terms of where it sits in my top 10, top 5 Marvel shows, it made the top 5 for me, but just barely. My first one is the first 2 seasons of Loki. I'm tacking those together. First 2 seasons of Loki. Moon Knight, and you can hate me for that if you want to. I thought Moon Knight was excellent. WandaVision after that. Hawkeye, and then Agatha All Along. But it is close between that and Falcon and the Winter Soldier, Miss Marvel, in terms of a whole show that did what it set out to do, start to finish. There were a lot of great things about these last 2 episodes. Going to get into the high points. We're going to kind of bounce around a little bit. I thought coming to the end of the road, the fallout from what happened with Lilia, the different things leading up to the end of the road, blending in death and who Rio was and how that worked, especially in episode 8. I thought episode 8 was a much stronger episode than the finale, and we'll get into why as we move on. I thought Billy realizing as he gets off the road all the different Easter eggs in his room that were Easter eggs to us, but were actually clues that something was a little off. It was very, very Easter egg heavy, and like I said in one of my earlier videos, it could have just been that the creators and the set designers took different pieces from different things all throughout the Witch's Road and just threw it in his room to kind of populate it. But in this instance, it actually served a purpose. It was all these things that Billy had populated the Witch's Road with when he created it with his mind. Now, I think that the big distinction here is to remember that the road was created by Billy, but the basis for the road was created through a lot of the research he had done leading up to going and finding Agatha, doing all those things. So the line between reality and fantasy and made up things in Billy's head is really blurred there. But he basically creates the canvas, and he populates it with a few things, but real people walked that road. So when they summon Rio, when they summon a Green Witch, they end up summoning Rio. She's actually there. People are actually dying. All those kinds of things are actually going on. Billy he's not in control of those things. You know, he actually has a sigil on him because he's met Lilia earlier. Agatha going and finding a coven of people was actually her doing that. It's not until they get on the road that the things that Billy has created start coming to life, and he starts populating it. The different challenges are populated by things in his room. And then how people interact with those challenges has everything to do with how they're interacting with Billy in terms of what's going on. And so some of that is happening at the same time with those interpersonal relationships and how Billy is relating to whoever the particular challenge is for. There were some Easter eggs that in hindsight should have meant more. I threw out a hint about the fact that there's moon symbols everywhere. The moon, the fire phase, the full power phase of the full moon, and if you look at Billy's sweater, which is a light shade of blue, there is a waning crescent and a waxing crescent over here, which would mean that him in the middle is the full moon, him at his full power, meaning he's at full power now. Whether he realizes it or not, whether he realized he did it or not. I thought those parallels to WandaVision were really great. I thought the interpersonal relationships all along the road, including wrapping up the road, and the way Agatha gets off the road I thought were really great. There is an aspect where Billy creates this, and then it kind of has a mind of its own. I'll give you an example. Billy's already gone from the road when Agatha has her interaction. The Salem Seven come into the road and chase down the coven, the way the road is pulling them back down to the road, all the different rules of the road. Some of those things were kind of baked in to what Billy just creates. And so there's not, because it was just created and Billy doesn't actually know exactly what he's done, some of those things, all those rules and all those ideas were kind of baked in to begin with. It's, you know, the particular challenges where different characters are interacting with each other are things that they brought onto the road themselves. So regardless of whether Billy created it or whether it was there all along, the fact that these people brought their own problems and their own issues together and it was more about the interpersonal relationships is a really cool story. The road just serves as a medium for that. So in that regard, anything that happened on the road I thought was great. The interpersonal relationships, the dynamics, the challenges, all the different things that happened, whether they were in Billy's mind or whether they actually happened, does not matter. It's when, you know, as we get out of that, the showdown with Agatha, Billy, Rio in Westview outside of Agatha's house, I thought was really well done. I thought Agatha sacrificing herself was really well done. Bringing some of that story to a close, which you don't know has brought to a close until episode 9 when you get some backstory. And then Billy showing back up in his Wiccan costume, which I thought was fantastic. Excellent costume, very well done. Looked really great. It was a really great costume. And so I thought all of those elements were really well done. Even Agatha sacrificing herself fit with the narrative that they had been telling up to that point about the two of them, fit with Agatha's story, fit with Billy's story, and brought the death portion of that to an end. Again, would have loved to see more of Rio, but I think exploring that later is probably wise. There's too much there that I felt like they needed to get into, or that even the writers felt like they needed to get into to move forward. It's when we get off the road, it's when we get into episode 9 and the fallout from everything that happened that I really have some issues, not particularly with the show or with the story that was told in terms of the characters and what they left out, but some things, the choices in writing, the choices in directing, and in that regard. So the flashback at the beginning of episode 9, I will give you that. I will give them that. The leeway and the reasoning for having to give you that at the end and throw that in after everything else had happened was necessary, because if you knew going in that Agatha had just created that story, that it wasn't real, I thought the parallels between the two of them, that Billy creates the road out of his own magic, but he does it based off of this research and all these things that have been going on for hundreds of years, because Agatha and her son came up with this story. I thought were really cool parallels between the two of them. It's things that really connected them together, and you needed those bonds because, you know, they established early on death is coming for Agatha's baby, coming for Nicholas. She begs for more time. Either her son being sick or her keeping her son alive by killing witches in order to keep death off of their trail. Either way, I think that, you know, per a discussion had at the second challenge where Death and Agatha are talking and she says, "I get my bodies," lends itself to that idea that Agatha was killing other witches so that Rio had her bodies, is probably what was happening to keep her son alive, or at least to keep Rio at bay. Now, whether she did it because she was doing it because it was her power, or whether she was doing it to keep Rio at bay, really doesn't matter. It bought her more time either way. I tend to think it was keeping Rio at bay, because when she has a conversation with Nicholas, when Nicholas asks her to stop killing witches, she says, I can't heal you. So whatever was going on, either she couldn't fully heal him or she was just giving him some of her power to make him feel better, whether it was a ruse or whatnot. It doesn't really matter. Everything that comes after that, when her son is taken, I get that her hatred of death for taking her son is and the way she took him is something that could propel her moving forward for years and years to come, hundreds of years. That's fine. But after that, whether it's a downward spiral or whether it's something she needed to do, she could have gone on living her life without pulling power from other people. Maybe she wouldn't have lived as long. Maybe she would have died 20, 30, 40 years like a normal person rather than living several hundred years. She decided to keep killing witches. She decided to keep doing that to keep her own power. She didn't do it to keep death at bay. She didn't do it to bring her son back. And if she did, the writers didn't tell us that. If she went after the Darkhold to try to get her son back or to try to get more power, they didn't tell us that. They didn't give us that, even though those things were introduced early on in the story. Those things were not brought up. There was gaps at the end that would have been okay gaps if they hadn't talked about some of this stuff early on, if they hadn't set the stage for these characters and these ideas early on, both inside the Witch's Road and outside the Witch's Road. I get that anything that happens inside the Witch's Road could have been the result of things that Billy knew that he's just bringing in, so it has nothing to do with the main characters. However, there were things that, because Agatha keeps killing people, is she doing it for her? Is she doing it for her son? Is she doing it to stay alive? Who cares? She could have stopped doing those things and lived out the rest of her days, died, 20, 30, 40 years like a normal person, or she could have found another way to live without taking everybody's powers instead of going with the con, using the memory of her son and the memory of his story to build this con to continue to kill witches. I'm okay with her being evil. I'm okay with her staying an ultimate evil, rotten, horrible person. But throwing a redemption arc in there where she dies and Billy is upset about it and she gets to go with him on this journey, it at best, it pushes her redemption story further down the road, and we just got 9 episodes reminding us of how horrible she is and not giving us any redemption arc. And we just have to be okay with the fact that Billy says, well, I killed a couple people on the road too. Okay, that doesn't make you like Agatha. Billy didn't know it was happening, okay? Billy didn't understand what he was doing and how it was happening, except that he pushes 2 of them away to protect himself at the moment that Agatha finds out who he is. Agatha, by comparison, has killed hundreds of people for hundreds of years, and the 2 of them just get to go, okay, it's fine. She doesn't have to partner with him. He doesn't have to partner with her. He could have banished her, been done with her. Just because you're sad about not being able to face your son, that's your problem. And if you want to chalk it up to him being an immature teenager and feeling for her, okay, fine. That's fine. But the choices in writing to get them there, to have this team up at the end where they say, let's go get Tommy, he already knew where Tommy was. He doesn't necessarily need her. He seems to have done pretty well by himself. There's plenty of other witches he could go find, including Jen, who gets away. I got no problem with Jen getting away, except if you're going to let anybody get away, of all the people that you introduced storylines to that have something to lose, everybody but Jen has something to lose. We don't know that Jen has anybody else but her in her life and her own personal business. Lilia's character was much more popular and much more well-liked by comparison. Alice Wu has this, she gets rid of the curse and this idea that she might see her mother again, which was a conversation that her mother had with her outside the Witch's Road has nothing to do with the Witch's Road, even though the Witch's Road kind of alludes to that. She even brings it up to Death, and the only line you get is Death saying, well, you died a protection witch, so you served your purpose. This idea that Death is somehow wise and says, and can kind of speak into, well, look, you served your purpose. Is okay. I'm fine that Death is wise. That makes sense. But this throwaway line that just is supposed to dismiss as a story point Alice Wu and her mother and all those kind of things. When Mrs. Hart dies, when Lilia dies, and what was their purpose except Lilia saves Agatha from the Salem 7? Lilia thinks she figured out her whole life. Maybe this is where she was supposed to die. She knew it was coming, but there's all of these things that people sacrifice themselves for Agatha, and the one person that needs something to happen to them as retribution never happens. Never happens. And now she gets to be a ghost, free from this. She still doesn't have to face her son, who she used as a con artist, who she killed hundreds of people for. She still doesn't have to face him, so she still hasn't had to face punishments, because she gets to be a ghost and do all these things without fear of dying again. Death is off her back. She's gotten everything she wants, but she's still a horrible person. The reason I bring all of that up is from a writing standpoint. The story that we were given, the story that we were given up until Billy goes and tries to close the road, which he needed to do. Agatha shows up as a ghost, and they have this argument where he's trying to get rid of her. And then, oh, but, my son is going to think ill of me. Yeah, he totally should. All of these things, just to give you that 5 minutes at the end where they're both happy with each other and they move off. In terms of writing, in terms of where they started the story, what they choose to give you, what they chose to give you, and what they don't give you at the end, it felt lazy. And I will liken it to the way that WandaVision ended. WandaVision as a show, even for all the twists and turns and what happened and what didn't happen, was an excellent show. Even in retrospect, people hated it to begin with, didn't like certain things about it, and then in retrospect, hindsight has given that show a lot of love. But it still ends on a low note. This big over-the-top CG production of bringing down the bubble, and you get some of the backstory ahead of time, which was a great episode in that one. But then this big fight with the sigils and Agatha and pulling her power and doing all these things. For a lot of people that watch the show, it ended in a very awkward way compared to all of the slow build and all of the mystery that you got beforehand. This one felt a lot of the same way. Episode 8 was way better. That was your finale. That, to me, you could have ended the show there. You could have thrown in the Witch's Road story, or not. You could have thrown in the Witch's Road story about how Agatha created the Witch's Road as well, and done it without bringing her back. I think it would have been a better redemption arc for her, which, yes, that means there's some expectations there, but given what they've given us, without throwing in another series or another show, you're not going to know if this was worth it or not. Luckily, it's the same thing with White Vision in WandaVision. Now that we know we're getting a Vision show, it's kind of okay that he had this showdown with his White Vision self and then disappeared. But if we weren't getting another show, where's he at? Is he out there anywhere? Where does he pop up? It was a throwaway piece that had a much bigger emphasis in the show than they allowed to have at the end. Several different things there that they had the opportunity to wrap up in different ways that they showed you they could wrap up in 1 or 2 sentences. They did that with Alice Wu's death. They did that with Rio popping up. How did Rio pop up when they summoned her? And she says, well, you summoned a green witch. I was the closest one. Okay. you can create lore because there's nothing else to base it off of, but they didn't. They threw this last, it was very hurried right at the end to lead towards something else. In terms of everybody getting what they want off the road, everybody gets what they want when they come off the road, except for Billy. Billy knows where his brother is, but what good does that do him? He wanted his brother back. So the road works for everybody else, theoretically, except the people that died, and except for Billy. So in terms of writing, I'm fine with what happened in the story, but in terms of how it ended, given everything you've done up until then, you're highlighting Billy and Agatha's relationship, but Agatha doesn't have to take responsibility for her actions. Billy takes responsibility for his and then lets Agatha off the hook, and then we have to wait for something else to get the rest of Billy's story. I'm excited for Billy to pop up somewhere else. Honestly, I'm excited for somebody else to use the character because I don't want to go through 6 more, 8 more, 9 more episodes of mystery and twists and this and that. I would much rather at this point, after WandaVision and Agatha, have a straightforward story with a goal in mind rather than all these twists and turns. It was good for this show. It was good for this character. But my biggest gripe of all of that is how flat it ended after all the buildup of episode 8, after the first half of episode 9, giving you that backstory. They didn't answer anything else. They pushed everything else aside. I didn't need to know that Agatha was dead. I didn't need to know that Agatha was a ghost. I didn't need to know that Agatha really felt bad about not wanting to go see her son. They added a different little story element in there that they didn't need to tell, where they had told all this other story up until then, and it felt like they abandoned some of those things in favor of a lot of setup for something else that may or may not happen. But like I said, that little point, I have some strong opinions about it, but I wrestled with it for a while. That little point in comparison to 8.5, 8 3/4 episodes of what I would argue are gold, and care for these characters, does not push it out of the top 5 for me. It was a really great show. I applaud them not using very much CG at all, lots of practical effects. The characters, the actors, all the different choices they made in this show were really, really great. And I loved the direction they went with 99% of it. I'm curious what you guys think about it. There was a lot to go on there. There's a lot of witches lore and a lot of things to add to the MCU that we can go back and talk about. One of my favorite elements from the last 2 episodes, other than Billy's costume, was when he goes to destroy the road. When he goes to knock the road down or to banish Agatha, he creates the same kind of sigil with flames and candles and all those kind of things, brings them to life almost the exact same way that Wanda does in Multiverse of Madness when she gets ready to use the Darkhold. So a lot of those parallels were really, really awesome. I know that this hot take will be, a lot of people won't like it. You can go on Twitter or X and find people that loved it, loved every bit of it, and some people that disliked certain portions of it just like I did, and have bigger questions about other things and expectations about where was this and where was that and why didn't you end it this way and you could have ended it that way. I'm not going to armchair quarterback that and say, well, you should have ended it this way. I just think the way that they did end it, based off of the writing and the stories that they chose to tell you and chose to introduce, there were too many of them to go this different direction, and it felt very flat based off of all the different things that they created. It felt like they threw in too many MacGuffins and too many different threads as for them all to just be things that they said, ha, fooled you. We were really trying to do this. In some respects, I think there's a fine line between doing that to throw people off so they don't see what you're doing and it adds to the mystery and the twist at the end, and having so many of them that it makes the end feel disingenuous or lazy to say, ha ha, fooled you. Well, yeah, you threw in 90 pounds worth of stuff and threw this little needle in that I was never going to find in the midst of all of this. You made the viewer ask too many other questions so that you wouldn't have to deal with this and you could tell this story at the end. It was too much early on for what they did give us. And so in that regard, from the writing, I think it was great in here, but it funneled way too quickly. And so that's why I say, I think with a stronger ending, with a few more questions answered, with a few more explanations for some of the things that they did throw in, it would have probably been top 3 for me, easily. It would have probably bumped ahead of WandaVision, because WandaVision did have that lackluster ending, that big CGI heavy ending. Curious what you guys think. I know I'm probably going to get some hate for that. That's fine. Thanks for watching, guys. We had a lot of viewers for this series. Tons of viewers, tons of shares, tons of likes, new viewers, and new subscribers. Thank you guys so much. Tell me what you think in the comments. Like, subscribe, do all the things, and then share this video. We have a lot of other videos that you can watch, a lot of different types of content on the channel. Check those things out, and as always, guys, when the next one drops, we'll catch you right back here. Later.